Hey, Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement here, and welcome to another edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday Training, the weekly video where we go deep into a concept or strategy from autism fitness programming and discover how it relates to fitness and adapted PE programming for the autism and neurodivergent population so they can get the highest quality experience that leads to meaningful quality of life changes. So, before I start, please like, subscribe, and later on, if this has been beneficial for you and might be beneficial for somebody that you know, share this video. Okay, let's get started. So in the previous two Tuesday trainings, that was difficult to say. In the previous two videos, I went over physical and then adaptive functioning, the first two parts of the PAC profile. That's physical, adaptive, and cognitive, and that's the way that we assess and address functioning skills in autism fitness programming. If we don't have these three, then we don't know what our baselines are. If we don't know what our baselines are, we don't have a really good starting point for each life skill athlete. So now we're going to get into cognitive functioning, and this is one of my favorite skills to demythologize, because superficially it's easy to say, oh, well, we have high functioning and low functioning, and that's that. But that is not that at all. Cognitive functioning, when we are talking about our autism and neurodivergent athletes as it relates to fitness and a bunch of other things, but let's stay with fitness right now. High and low, number one, is disrespectful to the athlete, and number two, doesn't tell us much about how they perceive information, how they perceive instruction, how they communicate. There's so much left out from those overwhelming generalizations, so they give us next to nothing in terms of clarity or usability. So in autism fitness programming, we break cognitive functioning into two distinct parts. Now, I say distinct just for definition purposes, but there is interaction between the two. Here's what I mean. We break cognitive functioning into neurological and then neuromuscular functioning. Neurologically, what we're concerned with as coaches and professionals or anybody who's implementing a fitness program is the athlete's communication skills, their reception of information, and their processing, and their ability to follow through with specific types of direction. Now, one of the things that is most important as far as coaching is not to overcoach or give the athlete too much information to start with. And this goes for any individual. We don't want to overload them with verbal information, especially as it relates to fitness and movement. So we're not going to explain an exercise to an athlete. We're going to label it and then demonstrate it. That's our label, demo, do, and cue. That's another video entirely. But the point is, with communication, we want to know as much as possible how our athlete receives information so that we can coach them as best as possible, so we can use the most age and individual appropriate communication for that athlete. And even in a group, this works because we know that one athlete does better with larger amounts of communication. So it may be an athlete who does well with multi-step activities. So we can say to Chris, first sandbell slams and then medicine ball scoop throws, and he can follow that sequence. And then we might have Randy, and Randy, if we give Randy two exercises verbally, and we say, okay, Randy, first sandbell slams and then scoop throws, Randy goes and does scoop throws, because that verbal information isn't being processed the same way as it is for our first athlete. So neurological functioning is coming back to how the athlete communicates and making sure that we understand, to the best of our ability, the best of our knowledge, and best of our observation, how the athlete thrives best with different modalities of communication. So it could be verbal, it could be a combination of verbal and visual as well, and we just need to figure out what combination works best for that individual or group. And then we have that receptive language, right? When we're giving directions or when we're providing instructions, does that work? Do we see the follow through from that athlete? So that's the neurological side. Again, the scope is narrow because we're focusing on fitness and movement. The second side of cognitive functioning is the neuromuscular. That's kinesthetic awareness or body awareness. We can get a little bit into the mind-muscle connection, but what does it mean and how is it relevant in our fitness programs for the autism and neurodivergent population? All right, so neuromuscular functioning, great. What? Well, here's what. With neuromuscular functioning, we're looking at the follow-through that the athlete has for performing that particular exercise. One of the most common issues that we see is range of motion or control through full range of motion, particularly on the strength exercises. So squatting, pressing, band rows, all of these exercises that require controlled movement through the concentric and through the eccentric as well. The athlete needs to slow down and really have control over the movement when they're performing these strength activities. So we're looking for the athlete's ability to control the movement and also their range of motion. So some previous videos that I've done on the particular challenges physically for the autism population when it comes to exercise focuses on range of motion and stability when the athlete is performing that movement. So we see a lot of fast, jerky movement when the athlete is performing that overhead press or that squat, a lot of bouncing instead of squatting. Those are two different things. So the neuromuscular component of cognitive functioning is how the athlete experiences the movement and then what we need to dial into in terms of not only our coaching, but setting up the environment. So for example, if we have an athlete who is bouncing down when they squat or going really quickly or squatting and sitting down and then not standing up again, common, then we want to put in some environmental constraints. This is what we call a modification so that the athlete is able to be successful, physically successful with that exercise, meaning they're performing it as best as they possibly can with control in that range of motion. So we might actually have to reduce the range of motion until the athlete can feel the movement for themselves. And of course, we have to reinforce them along the way because the athlete may not initially make the distinction between the bounce squat and the controlled squat. So we have to give it relevance. We have to give it meaning for the athlete. And that is where the neuromuscular aspect of cognitive functioning is so critical in our programming. If we can't have a baseline understanding of what our athlete, how our athlete perceives or how they're performing that exercise, then we're not going to be able to step in and provide the appropriate modification for that exercise until the athlete starts to get it independently, and then we can back up and fade our prompt, and now awesome, they have a new skill set here. So cognitive functioning, when we break it down into those two areas of ability, the neurological, communication, memory, and then receptive skills, processing, and then the neuromuscular, how the athlete perceives the movement itself, their kinesthetic awareness. These two things coincide beautifully because what they give us is how we communicate and the way that we communicate with our athletes. And it also gives us the way that we coach our athlete, meaning what level of prompt or modification do they need for this particular exercise, if any at all, based on what we're seeing. If we're seeing that fast, jerky motion, then we probably want to step in and provide our athlete with some type of guidance there so that the exercise is actually effective. And on the communication side, we understand that we give our athlete, in some cases, one direction at a time so they can be successful with it. Again, similar to the physical, similar to the adaptive, we want to figure out what our athlete's baseline skills are. Right now, could change in the next session, could change in the next 3 sessions, but we want to know where it is right now so that we can program and coach and communicate as effectively and successfully as possible for that individual. Is this possible in groups as well? Of course it is. Again, we just need that baseline for each individual in that group. And then we can, as we would do in any group, we would set up our communication strategies, our coaching strategies a little bit different for each athlete. Some athletes are going to do well with a lot more language. Some athletes are going to do well with a lot more mirroring and a lot less language. So that's cognitive functioning. Again, that's the C in our PAC profile: physical, adaptive, and cognitive functioning. Those are the three absolute necessities to assess and address if you are implementing fitness and adapted physical education programs for the autism and neurodivergent population, any other population also, because it's not just relegated to these populations, but you can take this and extrapolate that for the neurotypical population as well. So this closes out physical, adaptive, and cognitive, the PAC profile. If this has been helpful for you, please comment below if you have questions or if you have a topic you'd like me to cover in a future Autism Fitness Tuesday training. Put them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement. If you are ready to become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro, the link is in the description for this video below, and thank you very much for watching.